we can all see your lovely faces. But with that said, I think I'm going to roll into some questions that were sent in. So starting off, we have a question about Vericillium wilt. So the question comes in from Roger, and he is asking if you have any advice on whether a new infection of Vericillium wilt in a pawpaw tree and clematis vine on an urban property. They're not super sure if it is Vericillium wilt, so if you have some ID tips on figuring that out, but they're looking for a strategy for containment and advice on disposal of cut limbs. So that's our first question.
All right. So hi, Roger. Yeah, so verticillium wilt is actually a fairly common disease, a fungal pathogen that can infect lots of different tree species. That all being said, it is not very common on pawpaws. It's not actually known to be something that infects them. So I guess first and foremost, I would say for verticillium wilt, the really only positive way to identify it beyond the typical wilt symptoms, which can be other things, would be to send it off to a lab for testing. So I will say right now, one option is Guelph Laboratory Services. The website is afl.uoguelph.ca, and that's a spot that you can reach out and they can let you know if there's samples, how to prepare them and send them off, and they could verify whether you're seeing verticillium wilt. However, I would suspect it may not be verticillium wilt you're seeing. With pawpaws, I guess some follow-up questions I would have, or if you had an arborist come out and take a look, would be when it was transplanted, what kind of condition it's in, because pawpaws can wilt from physiological stress. They have root systems that really don't like to be disturbed or moved. So it could just be some stress that you're seeing that's creating those wilting symptoms. With the clematis, you're more likely to have clematis wilt, which is a different type of disease. It will cause kind of a blackening and rapid wilting of leaves as well. To control that, the good thing is it usually doesn't impact the root system. So at the first sign of infection, you'll have to cut your clematis back almost to ground level, which can seem fairly harsh, but that will prevent it from spreading further. And you can remove that material and just make sure not to put it in your compost pile and then put it back around your clematis, because that can spread the spores again. But if you're able to catch it early, your clematis will send out a flush of new growth. And usually infection occurs in really humid conditions. So if we've got a really consistently wet spring, but once the season rolls on, the infection is less likely to spread. So that would be your best kind of means of controlling that. But yeah, as I said, it's looking a little more closely at those symptoms. If you do, for any reason, think you do have a disease that's you can't diagnose, then sending it off to lab services can certainly help.
Awesome, thank you. Another question we got emailed in from Mary is earlier this year, they started to have a tree that wasn't producing normal leaves. And they couldn't find any information on why this would happen. Unfortunately, we didn't get a picture sent in, so I'm not sure how irregular these leaves look. But if generally you have any idea of why a tree might start producing irregular leaves from one point to another.
Yeah, I guess generally speaking, anytime a tree is injured or stressed, sometimes the new growth comes out. It can be a reaction to trying to grow really quickly, so trying to compensate for some damage, and that could be from winter freeze back or insect damage. Some plants, even in shade, actually will produce much larger leaves than would be typical. So that would be one thing. If there's been a physical injury or damage and the tree is trying to compensate and new growth is showing different characteristics, or if it's been infected, the leaves themselves have been infected by insects or mites that will actually cause kind of a deformed type of growth as well. The third thing is herbicide injury as well. So if there's been Roundup or other herbicides nearby that maybe were being sprayed on something and some drift occurred to your plants, that can cause a kind of malformed leaf to occur. So those would just be three things that generally speaking it could be, depending on the tree and what the leaves look like. Without being able to see those, I wouldn't be able to say for sure, but those would be some things to consider.
Awesome. Another question sent in was asking about red mulberry trees. So they're looking to find out where someone might find one, where they're being sold. So they're not looking for grafted fruit trees, but instead they like to reintroduce red mulberry trees to their area. So they live in Port Sturgeon, Zone 5A. And they understand that recently there've been some red mulberry trees in that area, but they've long disappeared since. And so they have a lot of property that they would like to spread these trees around on.
Okay, so right now, I guess, unfortunately, to answer your question, there's nowhere you can buy pure red mulberries right now. Red mulberries are quite rare in the wild, and what makes them even more rare is that they're often hybridized with the invasive white mulberry tree. So to positively identify a pure red mulberry from a hybrid mulberry, you have to have them DNA tested. They have very similar features. Even if you know you have a pure red mulberry, and if you collect fruits from that tree, there's a good chance that the flowers were contaminated by white mulberry pollen. So you might actually be collecting seeds from what you think is a good tree and then growing them and distributing them and actually sending hybrids out. So right now, if anyone is selling red mulberries, there's a real risk that they might be accidentally selling hybrid trees. So we're actually working on a program here at the University of Guelph to try to propagate pure ones. And we do that vegetatively by rooted cuttings. So we know that if we have DNA tested a pure red mulberry male and a pure red mulberry female, we're trying to get them established here at the Arboretum so that we can then do controlled pollination. So we can basically bag up the flowers, make sure the white mulberry pollen doesn't get in, and eventually we'll be able to hopefully release some seeds from these trees to nurseries to grow on. But with trees, it takes years. So we're kind of just at the starting phases of this with some of our propagation and some of our DNA testing. And then we're hoping as we add to our gene banks here at the Arboretum, that we will be able to distribute these pure red mulberry seeds so that people can confidently plant them and grow them again. But we're still a few years away. And unfortunately, there's no one else really in the province nursery-wise that are selling them at this point.
And another, I guess this is the last emailed question that we have, is actually a set of 3 questions. And so the first one being that someone has 2 4-inch cedars growing in 2 planters on their deck, very healthy at the moment, and they will they eventually be root bound? So they've already changed the planter twice with bigger containers. For how long will they be able to do this transplanting, and how big must the container become? Should they transplant them into the garden? Any suggestion is very appreciated.
Sure. Well, I guess if you want to keep them in containers, you could keep putting them in bigger containers forever until the point you won't be able to move those containers. But if you want to kind of keep them in a smaller container, what you'd end up doing is kind of similar to bonsai. So when you transplant them, the ideal thing would be kind of really late winter, early spring, when the soil's kind of soft, but the trees are still fairly dormant. You can pull them out of the pot and then give the roots a good haircut. So really cut the root back, plant it again. And what that'll do is kind of slow down the top growth a little bit. It'll allow it to refill that pot. And essentially you'll be keeping that cedar a little bit more dwarf. And that's really what bonsai is. It's just controlling the height of the tree by controlling the root system. And it's all about timing. If you do it at the wrong time of year, you can really stress the plant. But if you do that really kind of late winter, early spring, you could theoretically do that most years and keep the plants in a similar size pot for a little bit longer, potentially a lot longer. There are bonsais that are hundreds of years old. Without that root pruning though, absolutely, it will eventually get pot bound. It'll circle around and almost kind of completely use up all the soil. And in that case, if you don't want to do the root pruning, I would suggest finding a spot to plant them outside so they can kind of achieve their full height and size.
Another question is, someone lives in Toronto and they would like to know where they could buy swamp cedar. They see plenty in town, but no place to buy them. Okay, well, I guess with swamp cedar, I'm going to assume that that's referring to eastern white cedar or Arbor vitae, so Thuya occidentalis. Swamp cedar can apply to a few different types of trees regionally. There's a species called Chamaecyparis thioides that is sometimes called swamp cedar, but it's not really grown as much in Ontario. So if it is indeed the typical kind of Thuya occidentalis or eastern white cedar, they tend to be fairly widely available at garden centers. I can't specifically say what Toronto garden centers would offer, but I would maybe ask them for eastern white cedar. And in that case, they should be able to give you a few different options. And the last of this set of questions actually comes in with a picture. So I'm going to share my screen. So can everyone see this picture all right?
That's it, yeah.
Lovely.
Okay.
And so this question is about this tree, and it's that they've translated their white Ontario pine from a container to the garden. And in no time, they found a superficial hole that had not been there before. They're not sure if the hole is an entrance for an insect to stay below and damage the tree. Do you have any idea what this could be? A few years ago, they had to throw away a similar pine because of Calliscopus canker, and they're worried that something similar has happened to this tree.
Okay. So it's hard for me to say with 100% certainty, looking at a photo, what something may be depending on other features you'd be looking for. But what I can say is it, to me, looks like it may be a bit more of a superficial hole. So it might just be a little bit of a nick or an injury that's caused that. There are a number of different insects that will feed on pine trees and all sorts of other trees, and most of them we really don't have to worry about. But some wood-boring insects, for example, usually have more rounded holes. There's white pine weevils, which have very, very small holes. And usually with those insects, you will see a little bit of basically frass coming out. So kind of chewed up wood coming out that you might see piled on the ground or just under the wound. So looking at that, I'm hoping and assuming with what I can see, it's a little bit fuzzy that might have just been a little bit of an injury that's occurred. And what I would say is just watch it. If it's simply a nick that's caused that tissue to die back there, the tree should seal that up and kind of regrow and have no problems. But keep an eye on it over the course of next year. And if it obviously is getting bigger or you're seeing more of them or anything else, take a look for those other symptoms like weeping sap coming out or kind of chewed up woody frass that's coming out. And that will help diagnose what it could be if it is something.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes.
So those are all the emailed questions. For those of you joining us on the Zoom call, you're welcome to type in the chat and pop in any questions that you would like to ask us.
So I see that there's a question from Anna about cats. And yeah, so I have the same problem happening in my backyard right now. I have two cats coming into the backyard and hunting birds under my bird feeder. So yeah, so depend now yours may be like you said, Anna, that they may be actually feral cats. So if that really is the case, then I suggest, the best thing to do would be to get a live trap and trap them and take them to the Humane Society. Feral cats should not be outside, like allowed to run around, especially if they end up they're lost pets from someone. The easiest way to do that is if you get a live trap, put some tuna in it. I suggest putting the trap on like a raised surface, just because that will cut down. It won't stop a raccoon from going in the trap, but it will stop a skunk from going. Skunks aren't the greatest climbers, so if it can be something that a cat can jump onto and just do it during the day, then you've got a much better chance of just catching the cat and then being able to take it to the Humane Society. If you end up able, so the cats that are in my backyard, I know that they are neighbors' cats. So actually last week I went and talked to the neighbor about the fact that I don't want their cats in my backyard. And I brought so what's happening at our house is one of my dogs, it's bad enough when dogs eat cat poop, but one of our dogs rolls in cat poop. So it won't roll in dog poop, but he rolls in cat poop. So anytime we let our dog out in our own backyard, he comes back, his whole neck on both sides covered in cat poop. So, it's very frustrating to have your own yard where you can't let your dog out. The dog, of course, thinks this is great because now when he gets covered in cat poop, he comes to the back door, we let him in, he runs to the bathroom and jumps in the bathtub because now he knows he's going to get a treat and get bathed, which of course has to happen because we can't have him covered in cat poo. So hopefully if you can figure out if it's a neighbor's cat, you can ask them and that might help. If that doesn't help, in the summertime, you can get, I haven't tried this, but I know some people have and they really like it. You can get a motion detector sprinkler that only comes on when the cat walks past a certain part of your yard, and then this sprinkler comes on, and cats don't like that. Now that won't work in the winter. If I keep having trouble with the cats, what I've done in the past when I've had problems with cats is I've put a low fence around the back part of my bird feeders where there's a little bit more undergrowth. That stops the cat from, if it is able to hide, it stops the cat from being able to run to the bottom of the bird feeder to catch something. It has to actually go over this fence first. And that movement will give the birds a chance to go, wait, there's a predator there. And then they can at least get away. So yeah, so that's one way of hopefully stopping the cat from catching the birds that are coming to your bird feeders. I've also read that some people have success with getting like, I guess commercially you can get things like wolf urine or the different scents of predators that you can put around the boundaries of your property, and that may stop certain animals from coming in. So that's the only other suggestion that I've got. But I know that the fence thing definitely does help the birds survive a cat attack because they get a better chance of seeing the predator before it grabs one of your birds.
Awesome, thank you. So it looks like we have another question in the chat. Ariel, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So someone in the chat is looking for a native Ontario willow for basketry. Commercial growers usually sell hybrids grown for color. They're looking for a native shrub that can be coppiced annually.
Okay. Well, I guess I can give you a few sources. Our Arboretum plant sale at the University of Guelph Arboretum here, which has been different during pandemic times, but historically we have tried to sell a lot of the really interesting rare willows that you can't find elsewhere. And we're currently growing some in our nursery right now with hopes that we will have some available for sale likely next September for people. Otherwise, there are a number of really great native plant nurseries that sell things, and it's going to be hit or miss depending on which ones they might have in stock. But just a few that I would suggest would be Origin Native Plants, Ontario Flora, Native Plant Source, Native Plants in Claremont, and then Ontario Native Plants, which is online, and they're called onplants.ca. And all of them do sell native willows. Again, depending on their supply at any given time, you might see 5 or 6 species available, or maybe just 1 or 2, but those would be all ones to check out. And then also the North American Native Plant Society usually has a spring sale where they have a number of those growers coming in, and in any given year, they might have a number of interesting willows that you can try out as well. Thankfully, most of them grow fairly quickly. So if you're looking to get the baskets going and to basically kind of compass them back like that, you can get some planted this spring and hopefully be off to the races.
Awesome. And I'm not seeing any other questions coming in on Zoom. So I might give you guys just a couple seconds to, if you're holding on to a question, this is your time to shine and pop it in there. But if it feels like we've asked all our questions and hopefully gotten all of our answers, then we might just leave it here. I want to thank you guys all for coming and asking some really great questions. If you would like to join us for another Ask the Arb event, we will be hosting another one in January. So we're skipping December, but tune back in January for more of this goodness. Yeah, and you guys will have access to this recording if you'd like to rewatch and take notes on your questions. But if we feel like we've asked all our questions and gotten some good answers, then I will let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your Monday. So thank you so much for joining us, and maybe see you January.
Thanks, everybody.